Which real-life serial killer frightened/disturbed you the most? The railway killer in the late 90s. He rode trains throughout North America and many of his victims were in Texas, where I lived as a teenager. We had railroad tracks just behind our backyard and we frequently saw people riding in open/empty cars. When it became apparent a serial killer was riding on trains in Texas, my parents got the house alarm fixed and then monitored, and my dad slept with a gun near his bed. Angel Maturino Resendiz. I lived within a 5-minute walk of the main railway line that he used in southwest Houston. I remember when he killed that lady in Westview, not too far away. Whenever I'd hear the train passing through, it's a major line, I'd get a little chill. Richard Chase. Dude thought he was a vampire and that the government vaporized his blood. The solution? Kill people, and rape some post-mortem, and drink the blood. This one time he was almost caught, so he made himself a baby milkshake on the way. Edit, I believe the correct term would be baby smoothie, since he didn't add anything with milk. Apparently he only walked into people's homes that had doors unlocked. If they were locked, he presumed they didn't want him as a guest. Not even kidding. He's pretty high on my list because he took an unlocked door as an invitation to enter. I always lock my doors at night because of him, and I was born after he died. I was in Illinois when the Tylenol tampering murders happened. I don't think they ever caught the person responsible. Yes, there have been other more heinous murderers, but this one was scary. Think the entire nation was terrified by what was happening. It is the randomness of the crime, that there was never anybody convicted in that case, that make it so frightening. Robert Hansen, champion hunter in Alaska who would kidnap sex workers, fly them into the wilderness, and then hunt them for sport. He was also a baker, hence the media nickname Butcher Baker, who had a wife and 2 kids and was an active member of the community. What is scary about him to me is he was an average Alaskan. No one would think it weird if you went missing several times a year to go fishing and hunting. It's the culture here. He was active for 12 years and killed at least 17 women. I am surprised that nobody mentioned him before. He scares the shit out of me. East Area Rapist, who went on to become the Golden State Killer and we now know as Joseph James D'Angelo. This guy would stalk his victims for weeks leading up to attacks, along with many other houses, while he was working as a police officer. When he attacked, he was relentless and would stay in the house for hours messing with his victims. When cornered, he would kill without a second thought. I think the craziest part to me about the GSK is that he would break into homes and leave shoestrings in hidden places in the house so he could quickly retrieve them to tie victims up when he came back for the attack. Imagine being one of those victims and slowly realizing not only the situation you were currently in, but also that this isn't the first time this masked man has been in your home. What wild is that I feel like I've heard the name GSK for ages, but the guy was literally just sentenced a month ago. I just read about Fred and Rose West, a married couple in the UK who collectively were among the most prolific serial killers in modern UK history. It is a grim tale of rape and incest and prostitution and brutal murders and dismemberment of family members and random strangers, some of whom they buried in the garden behind their house. It's a fascinating yet horrific story. There's a book by Mae West, their daughter, not the film star, called Love As Always, Mum 30. It's an autobiography about Mae's life in the West's house and is well worth the read. Needless to say, it was a house of horrors. Look to their childhoods and you can see where their extreme sexual deviancies came from. Both their families were incestuous and physically abusive to the maximum. Rose was sexually abused by her father, and her father only allowed her to marry Frank when Frank approved of his occasional use of Rose. Frank himself was sexually abused by his mother and was encouraged by his father to sexually abuse all the farm animals and his sisters and his mother. Not to make anybody sympathetic for these freaks, but holy shit, they had bad childhoods. There's like a trifecta of trauma that so many serial killers seem to have in common. Sexual abuse as children, violence as children, brain injuries. Toolbox Killers. The transcript of the tape of Shirley Ledford's torture was one of the most terrifying things I've read. Some sick fucks. Bitika and Norris. There's some footage on YouTube of the local station covering the trial but were not allowed in the courtroom, had to stay in the hallway. Apparently one of the tapes was played in open court and there are shots of various people coming out in varying degrees of distress just from listening. Makes me very pleased that those two are dead. The recordings that they made of their crimes are now used in desensitization training for the FBI. That's how fucked up they are. I read the transcript for one of the many tapes they made, and that was more than enough for me. To actually hear the genuine screaming of the victim, when you know exactly what's happening to them, that's got to be a whole new level of sickening. Golden State Killer when he would stay in the room. Yup, victims would wait hours blindfolded thinking he's gone but he's still in the room. Definitely. He was arrested just a few streets over from where I live. We probably crossed paths at some point over the last couple of decades. So creepy. William Bonin aka the Freeway Killer killed my childhood friend in 1980. He was 16. I was 15 at the time, and that is too young an age to wrap your head around having a friend a victim of a serial killer. It changed me. Was he the one who picked up young boys who were hitchhiking? Jesus. I'm so sorry you experienced that. The Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez. Did some sick shit. Lived in Los Angeles, a dad and son team caught him in broad daylight. He gives me nightmares. I have a small story about this and it pisses me the hell off still. A few years ago, in middle school, my history teacher was talking about how she was a young girl and was terrified of the Night Stalker. She lived in the area of the killings. She moved a while later. She projected a picture of him up on the whiteboard and some girl in class looks up and says, "Oh, he's hot." My teacher just stared at her and said he would have raped and murdered you and your mother. He's a disgusting, terrifying man. My mom lived 5 minutes down the street from one of his victims in Mission Viejo before he was caught. She said she remembers how his presence in CA made everyone so scared they slept with windows shut even in the summer heat, and my mom had to call her husband at the time, every day before he left work to make sure she knew when he'd be home by. The Axeman of New Orleans basically forced the entire city into playing jazz music so he would spare their lives. Pretty horrific deaths and nobody was ever charged for the killings. Wasn't there a show on A&E recently that claimed it was most likely the Sicilian Mafia? Axes were the preferred weapon of Sicilian hitmen in the early days of the mob. And they, multiple killers, only targeted Sicilian shop owners who'd borrowed money from the mob. It's thought that a party promoter was the person who sent the letter demanding jazz be played. Axeman is very interesting because it's rarely mentioned that he only attacked Italian shopkeepers. Probably the most well-known series of hate crimes in the US. BTK. Worked code enforcement so plenty of access to homes, prominent church member, family man, depraved murderer. Saw an interview with one of the prosecutors, said the scariest thing about Rader was when you look at him and talk with him after seeing what I've seen, you realize the Dennis Rader you're talking to is not the real Dennis Rader. I remember this guy wanted to send some letters to the police on a floppy disk and he asked them if they could trace him if he sent them the disk. The police said that they could not trace him using the disk. He sent them the disk. The police traced him using the disk and made the arrest. For a serial killer known for being intelligent, it really seemed like a stupid way to get caught. Israel Keys, rapist, serial killer, necrophiliac. He was raised in a militant fundamentalist Christian household, joined the military, then came back to the US and killed at least 11 people all over the country. He went to extraordinary lengths to not be caught by choosing victims at random, killing far from his home. He would hide kill kits and return years later when he was ready to kill someone in that area. It's terrifying how he killed a woman in Alaska, went on vacation with his family to some Caribbean island for a few days, flew back to Alaska, took the poor woman's body and sewed her eyes open and had her corpse pose with a newspaper that was a few days old to throw off law enforcement into thinking she was a runaway. Dismembered her. He then used her credit card in different states to show she was on the move. But that was what got him caught. How did they catch him? Subscribe for more hot Reddit takes in your inbox, guaranteed.